Welcome to Cruise News, your daily update on everything happening at sea. Visit cruisenews.io to see today's stories and sign up for email alerts. Today we are covering three major updates across the industry. We have a tragic incident in the North Sea to report, some severe low water disruptions on European rivers, and the massive financial projections coming out of Port Canaveral.
Yeah, it's a very broad mix of stories today. We are really seeing this contrast between acute safety and environmental concerns on one hand, and then just this booming, record-breaking port growth on the other.
Right. And we are going to start today with the situation in the North Sea. This occurred on August 21st, 2026, aboard Ambassador Cruise Line's ship, the Ambition.
Right.
The ship was returning from a 14-day solar eclipse cruise. They had called in the Faroe Islands, Iceland, and Lerwick, and they were heading back to Dundee, Scotland. But at roughly 8:35 in the morning, about 36 nautical miles from Arbroath, a man was reported missing.
Yeah, and an incident like that triggers an immediate multi-agency response. It's governed by very strict international maritime safety standards. The ship stops, they begin search patterns, and regional authorities are mobilized immediately.
Right.
In this case, Coastguard deployed aircraft from bases in Prestwick and Carlisle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they brought in commercial search and rescue helicopters as well. Down on the water, you had lifeboats launched from Anstruther and Brodie Ferry, so it is just a massive mobilization of resources.
And according to the reports, Police Scotland did eventually confirm that a body was recovered from the North Sea, so the investigation remains open, but obviously this is a very sobering outcome, and our thoughts are with the family involved.
Absolutely.
But looking at the operational realities of an emergency like this, how does a crew handle an active search and rescue operation while, managing the thousands of other passengers on board who are expecting to disembark?
Well, it requires a systemic lockdown of the vessel. The crew has to conduct a full physical search of the ship. They have to exhaust every possibility that the missing guest might just be somewhere on board, maybe suffering a medical emergency.
Because modern cruise ships are huge.
Exactly.
Mm.
Thousands of cabins, crew areas, technical spaces. So to do that effectively, the passengers had to remain on the ship. Disembarkation in Dundee didn't even start until around 11:30 a.m.
Which means the people waiting in the terminal for the next cruise are also delayed, right?
Right. It's a huge logistical domino effect.
Yeah.
Ambassador had to instruct arriving guests to stick to their original terminal schedules just to prevent a massive crowd from showing up all at once. And because of the delay, the Ambition actually had to depart Dundee that Friday evening for a rushed one-night repositioning voyage down to Newcastle upon Tyne.
Just to keep their upcoming schedule intact.
Yeah, they had to arrive in Newcastle by 8 a.m. the next morning. They have upcoming 5 to 13-day itineraries they need to maintain. So that means burning more fuel for speed, extensive crew overtime, and scrambling to coordinate with port authorities for pilot boats and berthing windows that weren't originally planned for that exact time. If they miss that window, the calendar for the rest of the season is thrown off.
Right, so one sudden emergency shifts everything. But moving on to our second story. The industry is dealing with a very different kind of challenge in Europe right now. It's not a sudden emergency, but a slow environmental disruption.
Yeah, a chronic one. The inland waterways are really struggling right now.
Yeah, in early August 2026, the European Drought Observatory released a critical assessment. There are severe low water issues across the Danube, the Rhine, and the Main rivers due to these prolonged droughts.
Right, and the key metric here is the ship's draft.
Which is the distance between the waterline and the bottom of the hull.
Exactly. When the water drops this much, certain pressure points on these rivers become completely impassable. So operators are seeing bottlenecks on the Danube near Passau and Vienna and on the Rhine near Koblenz. But they aren't just canceling the season, they're adapting.
Yeah, the contingency planning is pretty fascinating. Emerald Cruises, for example, they had a sailing out of Budapest scheduled for August 30th. And because the water was so shallow, they actually swapped out the ship. They took the 2014 Emerald Sky and substituted it with the Emerald Destiny.
Right, and both of those carry about 182 passengers.
Yeah.
So it shows they are micromanaging which specific hulls can best navigate these changing drafts. Meanwhile, Avalon Waterways did have to cancel some of their Danube Dreams departures. And Saga River Cruises is actually routing their ships through Dutch waterways just to avoid putting their premium guests on buses for a coach holiday.
Yeah, nobody wants a coach holiday instead of a cruise. But Viking has a really unique strategy for this with their sister ships, right?
It is a brilliant logistical solution. Viking has over 70 of these standardized 135-meter long ships carrying about 190 passengers. So when a river section is completely dry or unnavigable, they will sail one ship to the north side of the blockage and an identical sister ship to the south side.
And they just meet in the middle.
Basically, yeah. The passengers get off the first ship, take a quick bus ride past the dry section, and board the second ship. And because the layouts are identical, they walk into the exact same stateroom they just left.
That's incredible. It saves the whole itinerary.
It does. And Jon Burrows, the COO of AmaWaterways, mentioned they're constantly monitoring hydrological data, weather forecasts, everything to anticipate these blockages. They haven't had to cancel a single summer departure because of this kind of route planning.
Wow.
Yeah, they're even deploying new sister ships, the Amaruti and Amafiora, by 2028. But, even with all that data, nature's unpredictable. Look at the Viking Ulur.
Right, the incident in July.
Yeah, July 28th.
Yeah.
It's a 443-foot river ship. It grounded near Vidin, Bulgaria, with 186 passengers and 52 crew. Authorities cited the extreme low water and nighttime conditions.
There were no injuries, right?
Correct, no injuries. Passengers were safely evacuated during the day to continue to Bucharest. But it really highlights the intense pressure crews are under. One slight deviation in a shrinking channel, and you have an evacuation.
Right. So we're seeing an industry dealing with tight margins and vulnerabilities in Europe and the North Sea. But our final story today takes us to Florida, where the margins aren't shrinking at all. Port Canaveral is projecting massive, unprecedented growth.
The contrast is just staggering.
It really is. I was looking at their fiscal 2027 projections, which began on October 1st. They are projecting 10.9 million passenger movements. That is up from 9 million this year and 8.6 million in 2025.
Yeah.
They are expecting 1,213 cruise ship calls with 23 home-ported vessels, which pushes their operating revenue to nearly $282 million. How does a port even physically move 11 million people?
Well, you have to think about turnaround day logistics. Moving 11 million passengers means moving about 22 million pieces of luggage. You're offloading waste, pumping fuel, loading thousands of tons of fresh food, all in maybe an 8-hour window.
The traffic alone sounds impossible.
Oh, it's massive. They are projecting a 33% increase in days where 5 or 6 ships are docked at the exact same time. So to handle that, they have a $1 billion capital program called the Port Canaveral Advantage.
$1 billion.
Yeah. For example, this October, they are completing a 13-story parking garage at Cruise Terminal 6. It holds 3,700 spaces.
Just for one terminal.
Just for that terminal. And Cruise Terminal 5 is expanding to 170,000 square feet by December. Plus, they are doing a $95 million expansion of Cruise Terminal 10, handled by PCL Construction.
Right, getting a new glass facade, larger security screening areas, which they desperately need. And that's targeted for November 2027.
Exactly. And they're already planning a brand new Cruise Terminal 4 at Blue Points Marina to open before spring break 2029. And they're building this fast because the cruise lines are bringing in so many ships.
Yeah, the breakdown is huge. Royal Caribbean has 319 scheduled calls in fiscal 2027. Carnival has 302. Disney is at 235. Norwegian is doubling their presence to 155 calls.
And MSC Cruises has 146.
But here's the thing. We just covered the environmental risks in Europe and the safety logistics on the ocean. Yet, Fitch Ratings recently upgraded the Canaveral Port Authority's revenue bonds to A+ weight. Why is the financial market so confident when there are all these operational risks out there?
Because financial markets are looking at the economics of scale. The ships coming to Port Canaveral are not 190 passenger riverboats that are vulnerable to droughts.
Right.
They are massive. You have the Carnival Festival coming in May with a capacity for 6,600 passengers. The MSC World Atlantic arrives in November with 6,800 guests. The sheer volume of revenue generated by 6,800 people on a single ship creates a profit margin that, for Wall Street, completely outweighs the operational risks.
So they are basically betting on the cash-generating power of these megaships.
Exactly. They view Port Canaveral's billion-dollar infrastructure as a secure, low-risk investment because it's built to constantly feed these floating resorts.
Well, it is certainly a fascinating thought to end on. As these ships continue to grow into 6,800 passenger floating cities, does their massive size make them more resilient to the challenges of nature, or does it just create a much larger, more complicated puzzle for crews and authorities to solve when an emergency inevitably happens? Something for us all to consider. Thanks for listening to Cruise News. Visit cruisenews.io to catch up on the latest updates and sign up for free email alerts.